Welcome to Conversations with Laurel. Today is May 2nd, and I have a returning guest with me today. Her name is Kathy Taylor. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, glad to be
Kathy,
back.
yeah, thank you. Kathy is the author of a couple of beautiful books, one called The Birthing House and one of my favorites called Trees and Other Witnesses. I absolutely love your short stories, Kathy.
Thank you.
So today it's funny because this is going to be a different kind of visit. The other day we were catching up, and somehow kindness came into our conversation. And you said to me, do you remember what you said to me about kindness and about
I think
people?
just, yeah, in the middle of difficult, chaotic times well, two things that it's really important, I think, to focus on joy and kindness, and they're kind of related. Just small things that you can do to keep alive something I think is really important.
Yeah, and so you told me that you've been sensing or experiencing that people are being more kind. Is this something that you're actually experiencing? Because I'd like to kind of talk about that.
Yeah,
Kind of. I
yeah.
don't want to say kind of anymore.
Kind of. Well, yeah, I don't know if it's just that I'm more aware of trying to just make beautiful moments with other people, or if it really is that other people are also being extra open and kind, which is surprising. And during these times, I would have thought it'd be the opposite, but I notice that when I go to the small town of Buena Vista, and um, just little interactions that make your shopping trip, a nicer experience, and just that sense of in each moment of interaction with people that there's another person there in front of you that um, you can in some way connect to,
Yeah.
uh, and give them a nice moment. I
Yeah.
just felt that recently.
I now I wonder why, and I wonder if it has anything to do with people being exhausted in needing
Hmm.
kindness, needing more kindness in their lives.
Yeah, I do wonder. I don't know if yeah, I think in difficult times, sometimes people react in fear, which I think is almost the opposite of kindness, a kind of pulling back, pulling in, walling yourself off, ready in defense. And another possibility is to just reach out for that, for what's missing, or reach out for some kind of just connection in the moment. It doesn't matter who that person is in their large life story. It matters that there's a sort of a human connection there that in very small ways can be lovely if we allow it to be. And so yeah, maybe people are needing that, or maybe they're just unconsciously um, responding to those moments. I don't know if it's because it's a small town, but I've been finding that a lot.
Well, I think that's fabulous and encouraging, right? So
Yeah.
this is my first real conversation, right? I interviewed yesterday. I had a visit yesterday with an amazing woman who talked about she wrote a book about life lessons, inspiration after having a double mastectomy and her journey with that,
Mhm.
and. So it was a little more scripted. This is kind of like I wanted to have a discussion with you, and so I didn't really want to
Yeah.
plan anything, but I did go online and I did look up one of the definitions, and I used AI for this. And so the definition is kindness is a character quality involving being generous, helpful, and caring towards others. It encompasses acts of gentleness, respect, and concern, often motivated by a desire to benefit others. Kindness can significantly impact both the individual's well-being and the well-being of those around them. And so I guess that's, I mean, everybody knows what it means to be kind, right? You would hope.
In some way, I think we do. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And and so talk to me about what your transformation in a way recently. You've had some, I think, difficult situations in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. My husband had some very traumatic medical situations that were traumatic for both of us, really. Um, and so I think in some ways that plus what I consider the uncertainty in the world right now, they can make you very anxious. It can make you, um, as I said before, want to sort of curl up inside your safe life or your routines. And of course, I think we all do that to some extent. Um, but it also made me want to get outside of myself a little bit and um, search for connections of beauty, for one thing, beauty, art, but particularly nature. And so I just found myself, this wasn't a plan, I just found myself doing this. We live off the grid and we in the mountains and we can just go out our door and walk, for long distances. And so I found myself doing that. I often take my cell phone in case there's a picture I want to get. And I found myself not only taking pictures, but sort of zooming in on pictures. In other words, it's not that I needed another 1,000 pictures on my phone. But just that experience of seeing more closely, more deeply, framing different aspects of something. And so it started with trees and wood. As you know, I've always
Imagine
loved
that.
trees.
Imagine
Imagine
that.
that. And and
Trees and other
just
witnesses. Yeah.
the weathered wood that we find out here, that it really is kind of sculpted by the wind and the sun and time into, if you look closely, not only beautiful works of art in a sense, but also I would find characters in them. I would find animals and faces and um oops, I was going to silence my phone. Hang on just a second. Okay. Well, anyway. And so yeah, it just made my walks that were already sort of contemplative and good exercise and out in the elements. It also turned it into kind of an exploration that was outside of me and yet very fulfilling inwardly. Um,
Healing. Healing.
healing. That's a good word. Healing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I
And
looked at, oh, go ahead.
yeah, no, go ahead. No, go
I was gonna
ahead.
say I looked at some of your photo essays about the trees, and I just really loved what you did with them. So your photo essay book is called One Tree, and so you look at the same tree, and there are different photographs, different angles, different lights,
Yeah.
and in each of them you have a name. You've got identity, you've got split personality, you've got diversity, vulnerability, maternity, gender ambiguity, artistry,
Uh-huh.
but very, really clever and fun and beautiful. And how did you come up with that idea of just naming all these
Just
different names, all these different
Yeah,
trees?
well, it just happened that this one tree, when you first look at it, it looks like a very plain tree, a little bit sad because it's been struck by lightning, and so there's part of it that's been split open. It's actually has two pieces to it, and there's all these scars, and um, I don't know how old it is, but it has the bark is incredibly thick and textured and peeling off in places, and I just started looking more closely at it, and I was just being playful too. I was trying to make it just a funny thing, but seeing different faces, creatures, moods. Um, and,
Identities, yeah, different
and some
identities.
often I would just take a picture. Sometimes I zoomed in, but mostly I just took all kinds of pictures when I kept seeing things and then went home and zoomed in and found that bark is just an incredible thing in itself. And on this tree, I mean, it's just the more you zoom in, the more you find faces. I have one that looks like ghosts and, just all kinds of things, but also beautiful works of art, the textures and colors and that you would never know. You see bark at a distance and it has this sort of monocolor look, but that's actually not at all what it is. And so for me, that was a little bit like trying to celebrate our humanity, as a whole, the humankind. That's another thing I want to come back to. Um,
Our
the word
humanity is what you meant, our humanity.
Yeah, exactly. Humanity, right? But so there's the whole of all of us in our great colorful diversity, but there's also in each person much more there than the face or the image that you have of that person when you start to look more closely. And so for me, this tree was kind of a symbol of reconnecting with that, but also this one poor tree that's been battered and survived many things, has many scars as we all do in some way or another. Um, and there it was. The more I looked, the more stories I found. Um, and the more it showed how this one being is very diverse, as well as all of the beings that make up our humanity. Uh,
That's beautiful. I mean, I've been looking at my bark lately, and
yes, we all I know what you mean. Yes.
it's not quite the young sapling uh, bark
Yes.
I used to
Yeah, the
have.
kind that you just look at your hand one moment and discovered that you
Yeah.
somehow injured it when nothing really happened. Yes, that is part of our aging process. But but I just found this tree, and we think of trees as not really dead, but they seem like they're wood, the kind of thing
Things. They're
think of as
things. Yeah.
they're things, yeah. And we know that they grow and they're alive, but to find this sort of um, wounded, aged being that is still alive and yet has all of these different stories of, you know, trauma, I guess you could say, and also just
Yeah.
life. Um, that it just, I tell people, and some people laugh. I just said it's become a good friend of mine. When I walk out that way, I always stop by and sort of just, pat it. And sometimes when I pat it, something knocks back, and I can't figure if it's a creature inside or it's just the hollowness of but anyway, without being sort of extreme about it, I really do feel a sense of connection with that tree, both symbolically and just
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
So
Of course, this brings to mind Shel Silverstein's The Giving Tree, right?
yes.
Which
Right.
still brings a tear to my eye when
Yeah.
I read that.
Yeah. It's a
Really,
great story.
it's such a beautiful story.
There's
And
there's some children's stories that work for all of us, really. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a favorite one, and I look forward to reading it to my grandson someday.
Yes.
I have
Oh,
I
yes.
have a new
So
baby
exciting you
grandson.
have one.
I'm very excited. So
Yes.
yeah, being kind, and again, some of the things I discovered, and these are things that we all should know, right? But
Right.
the impact on well-being,
Hmm.
studies have shown that practicing kindness can lead to increased feelings of connection, reduced
Yes.
loneliness, improved mood, and better relationships. It can also
Hmm.
boost self esteem and confidence, making individuals feel more valuable and appreciated.
Hmm.
So, in a way, being kind isn't always selfless, is it? Sometimes it can be a little selfish because
Hmm.
you know that if you're going to be kind, it's going to make you feel good. So is that selfish or is that just
That's one of those difficult questions, right? Um, doing loving someone else is also good for you. And I think if we dig too deep, it's hard for us to ever feel pure in anything. But but it it seems like such a simple thing because if it makes both parties feel good, then what does it matter? And it's sometimes it just opens a door if, you know, sort of to reach out and just connect in some small way allows the other person to do that too. And sometimes it's surprising um, and sometimes people don't, they're distracted or they whatever reasons they don't respond. But I find people seeming to be extra friendly to me as well as it working when I do it with others. And so, and I just realized how much that brightens my day. Just that moment, and I did a little looking up too, because I'm always curious, being the linguist that I am.
yes.
I love to look at origin of words, and it actually comes from I don't know, Proto-Germanic, whatever roots. that are related to kin and the other use of kind, as in sort of an, being part of a collective identification. And so, and then of course in German, the word Kind, K-I-N-D, means child. Um, but so
Kindergarten. Yeah. Yeah.
when we talk about humankind, let me see, I was looking up, it originally comes, yeah, from a Proto-German Kundi, which meant natural or native. Um, and then Kunjam, I don't know how to pronounce it for sure, but which meant family. So related to the word kin as well as kind. And so it developed into meaning sort of nation or um, uh, and then
Community or yeah.
and then sort of moving to that, you're with your own kind, your kin, you tend to be loving and um, forgiving or connected. And so if you take that then sort of beyond the family sense, then it seems to be labeled more as kindness because you're sort of doing it when you don't have to, or you're reaching beyond your same group, your kin, or you're sort of realizing the kinship that we all have. Um, I saw a sign once uh, at some demonstration that said, humankind, you can be both.
Oh, oh, I like that.
Yeah,
I like that a lot. And I like the idea that, when you're kind to someone else, they might be distracted, right? And you might take them by surprise,
yeah,
especially if it's a
right,
stranger, right?
right,
And
right.
then I think we need those reminders in our
Yeah,
lives that, oh, so that was very nice what that person just did to me.
yeah,
I've got bags in my hand and something fell out and someone, reached to
yeah,
to help me with it. I was like, oh, thank you. Then you might think about, paying it forward kind of thing, right?
right, right.
Um,
Right. Well,
yeah.
and I ran across another quote which I really like, and this was Plato. It just popped up, the internet. That's the way that,
Yeah, I
and
know.
Plato said, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a harder battle."
Yeah, yes.
Um, which might not be literally true, but the fact is that we all have our internal lives going on in each moment of interaction and connection. And so um, creating a connection of sort of momentary kinship, I think, is kind of what the act of kindness feels like. So
Yes, absolutely. And so in addition to being an author and a linguist, you're also a musician. So there are probably a few songs out there about kindness. Um,
yeah, in some way, I'm sure.
why
Yeah,
why
and
does why does cruel to be kind? Why does cruel to be kind come to mind?
oh, because that's a great line.
Cruel to
It's
be kind. Yeah.
yeah, and music does a similar thing for me as sort of the pictures. It's a way of finding expression, and of course the word expression means to press out word. So
Ah,
express. So
express. Express.
art is a form of expression that sort of presses outward some of who you are, and so um, yeah, it comes naturally to me because I feel the need. It gives me it brings me joy. Even if it's a sad or, angry something, it sort of takes it outside of you and makes it its own thing. So you can sort of say, oh yeah, there's that experience or there's that moment. And I'm all of those and none of those. And it's a good way to forgive yourself too, I think.
Talk about forgiving yourself. What do you mean forgive yourself? What do you have to forgive yourself for?
I think forgiveness is another wonderful word, but
Yeah.
I once was asked to give a talk on forgiveness. It was a theme of the college where I taught for a semester, and so I was invited by the students to give a talk to meeting for worship as a Quaker, sort of a Quaker church setting. And so I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to say that everybody hasn't already said, you know? But basically, again, that notion of expressing, of breathing, um, you have to you have to take in and you but what you need, and you have to give out. If you don't, for instance, when you're breathing, if you don't exhale fully, you can't inhale fully. It causes a cycle of anxiety or problems with your oxygen levels and your all that. So there's a sense um, of that rhythm of breathing in and breathing out. And it's also true that I think it was Nelson Mandela who said, um, what was it? Um, something like if you can't forgive, it's like drinking a poison and expecting it to hurt someone else. The
Ah,
notion of revenge, and he also said, if I can't forgive and let go of those 20 years in prison, then I'll still be in prison.
yes, the idea that
So
if you can't forgive someone, you're giving them power over your emotions, right? Because
in a
if
way, and you're also poisoning yourself in a sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so that notion of giving and receiving um, became part of my talk about forgiveness, that it's part of this, that it isn't necessarily a selfless act. It's part of an interaction that is essential for healthy life. Um, but also there is that not maybe not selfish, but that self-important part of it that if you don't give out fully, you can't take in.
Yeah, I find myself very focused on my breathing right
Yeah,
now.
I know. Once you start thinking about it, it becomes kind of
Reminders to be kind, reminders to breathe. Breathe
right.
in. Everybody watching this right now, breathe in really, really deeply.
Right, right.
And then breathe out all the way. Whew, you might get a
Yeah,
little
no,
dizzy. Or you might get a little dizzy if you breathe in and don't let it all out.
right,
Right.
exactly. Yeah, and of course, thinking about it too much makes it hard to manage.
So this talk that you mentioned about forgiveness, is this online somewhere or is this something that we could
I didn't. No, I
you
don't
didn't
think so.
record it?
No, I don't think so.
All
Um,
right.
I've noticed that was a while ago. That was, should I say, my senior year. So the year that I was retiring, the seniors who were graduating invited me to give this talk. So it was kind of a, yeah, I
All
had,
right.
I put together ideas, but it was a little more extemporaneous than just
All right. All right. Well,
reading
maybe
it.
that's something that you might think about doing.
At some
Doing
time,
a
yeah.
Zoom thing or
Yeah.
a TEDx or something. Have you done any TEDx's? Any
No,
TED Talks? No? I haven't
no.
either.
Have you?
We should,
Yeah, no,
no, I've not. We should think about that. I think we have some things
we could
that
probably find something to, yeah,
yeah, definitely. All right, so
that's
I'm gonna tell you something that you might not believe, okay?
okay.
I am not always kind.
No.
It's true.
I think we will, if we're honest, we'd all have to say that. This is not, it's not a personality trait, an inherent trait, and it's also not an intentional skill all the time. It's something that happens sometimes and doesn't other times, and something we can cultivate, but you don't want to make it too intentional or it can become insincere.
Yeah, I'm gonna blame my Nana.
Okay.
God rest her soul, because she was well, um, one of my sisters when my Nana was babysitting, one of my sisters missed the bus home from school,
Mhm.
and she called my Nana who was babysitting at the time and said, "How am I going to get home?" And my Nana said, "Stick a feather up your ass and fly home." So that's
That's creative.
I'll blame. I'll credit my Nana a little bit with
Yeah.
some of my maybe too quick to speak my mind sometimes. I don't know. And sometimes I feel like I cannot be kind. And again, that this we don't really want to get into the whole political situation, but there's I have not been kind lately. For a while, I was posting things on my Facebook page, that were not supportive of what's going on right now, and then I decided no, that wasn't making me feel good, and everybody was getting in arguments, and so I stopped doing that. And
Mhm.
then I started up again because, and again, this is a really complicated
Yes, it is.
decision for me
Mm.
because I don't want to hide. I don't want to be fearful
Mhm.
of my opinions
Mhm.
that I might share. And so, although I respect everyone's right to have an opinion, it doesn't mean I respect everyone's opinions.
Right. Yeah, sure.
And so that can kind of make me not kind
Oh
in a
yeah. I
way.
think I think we all struggle with that. That's a I went to a I mean, I don't know if you call it a protest, but it was just sort of a vigil yesterday in Ben Vista. That was just I can't remember what it was. I think it was it was specifically a May Day thing,
Hmm.
and people
Hmm.
had signs about just what's happening now and what they're really concerned about. And it's such a broad range of things. I mean, this isn't just,
Yes. Yeah.
no war. It's across the whole spectrum of everything. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to say. And so on my sign, I just wrote Mayday, Mayday.
Help.
Yes, help.
Right. Right.
But so while I was there, it's just nice to be together with other people who are sort of
Hurting. Hurting.
hurting and also concerned, and who are these are not angry. These are not like sort of violent protests.
Mm.
That it's always made clear that it has to be very nonviolent and respectful. And
Yeah.
so it's just a bunch of people, mostly in silence, sometimes cheering, but um, standing out among other people and saying, "Here's my concern." And even some of these things, you wonder if it'll end up being violent or is it dangerous and all that stuff. But I have just found such, I mean, I've only been to a few, but I found such communion with other people, and I don't know anything about them really, except the sign they might be holding. Yesterday, a woman who was in the middle of getting chemo, um, showed up, and she said, "I don't know how long I'll last, but can I stand here with you?"
Yeah.
And that really drew me out. And I just said, of course. And I took some pictures of her so she could have them for, um, and just, I felt this incredible uh,
Kinship.
kinship. Yeah, just drawn towards her that, you know, we all have our, you know, oh, it's cold and rainy. I don't want to go out, or I'm tired, or I'm not sure if it's safe, um, and it's an individual thing. You just decide at that moment, is this something I want to do, I can do. And then when I saw this woman who, um, didn't have any hair, she had a cap and she was kind of frail, but she said, "I just want to do this," and here I am. And so a few of us around were extra kind to her, and because it was just natural.
Yeah.
But it also gave me strength, just in general, to see someone who's just taking a moment and the energy that she has to do something that she thinks is important, and in the limited way she can. Um, so that, again, that sort of notion of kindness, meaning finding kinship with other people. Um,
Yeah.
and the nicest moments are when you don't know anything about that person.
Mm.
You don't know how they voted, you don't know what they care about, you don't know how they treat their family or whatever. But in that moment, you're just two people finding some kind of kinship. And, you know, and then the next moment, you might swear at somebody who cut in front of you, on the road, or it's yeah. I think that's what makes us interesting.
I like that. Yeah. I try to acknowledge people who might feel invisible. I spoke a long time ago. I was talking with an older woman who was probably my age at the time. This was a very long time
It's
ago.
all relative, right?
It's all relative. And I asked if she felt invisible because
Hmm.
that's something that I've been reading sometimes. Sometimes
Yeah,
older people
yeah,
do feel invisible, whether,
right.
whether it's, just out and about, whether it's with doctors, whether it's
Hmm.
wherever, right? And
Right.
so to find those invisible people, the cart guys at Walmart, the
Hmm.
the checkers, just people
Hmm.
who you just assume are doing their job, and
Right.
it's almost like they're not important
Yeah.
individuals.
They are their job. That's the way it feels
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so you know, every once in a while to just acknowledge them,
Hmm.
say something, surprise them maybe, because I don't think they get a lot of attention or acknowledgement.
Hmm.
And I don't want to be invisible. I don't ever want to be invisible.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
I think I will do more myself to make sure that I'm not invisible to
Hmm.
people. And,
Yeah.
again, my Nana and me, I might say some things.
Sure. Well,
Uh,
yeah.
uh, so
Well,
what else?
and
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
when we were talking about sort of kindness, that we're not always kind, and that you can actually overdo it. There can be a kind of power play where you're trying to be sort of holier than thou and be, you know, I can't think what the word is at the moment. Being kind,
Righteous, kind of in a
yeah,
way. Rich,
or
yeah.
patronizing, or there are, like true acts of kindness, I think, shine through in their own authentic, spontaneous way. But it can be an oppressive thing if what we think is kindness is being patronizing, or and I think that actually is an issue for women a lot.
Yes.
The notion of maybe not kindness, but genteelness is taking care of women and, treating them as a sort of fragile object or something. And so, that for a lot of women, that often stirs up my less kind nature. Because, what, do you think I'm helpless? I mean, what? Um,
Yeah.
and
Do I
yet,
look like a little old lady?
yeah, right. But at the same time, it could just be a gesture of, just like,
Yeah.
I'm opening the door for you because you have your hands full, which
Yeah.
is lovely.
Yeah.
But and so I do that often, where I open a door for a man, or open a door for just someone, and I think people do that a lot around here, as a gesture of just consideration.
Yeah.
It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with your gender or your job or but I do think women often get a bit oversensitized to those gestures that, um, and I think anyone, if you seem patronizing, or for instance, with your children when they're teenagers, or my granddaughter is just coming through the end of her teen years, and there are times when your act of caring and kindness can be seen as micromanaging or judgment, or especially for teenagers. But and so that's kind of tricky. Um,
Mm. Hmm. Have
and
you watched the show Ted Lasso? Are you familiar with
a
that?
little bit,
You do, yeah,
yeah.
a little bit. Yeah. I,
I
I,
just
I,
watched maybe once. Yeah.
I think about his character and
Hmm.
how kind and
Hmm.
and nice he is all the time,
Hmm.
even
Sometimes
when
clueless, but yes.
sometimes clueless and
Yeah.
sometimes, nice almost to a fault. Well, it gets like it might get another character angry because they want him to
Yeah.
fight, right? And he
Yeah. Right.
doesn't.
Right.
So always
Yeah.
kind of always taking the high road.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah. And if that becomes a part of your self-image, that you're going to be sort of saintly, then it can it can backfire.
I'll never say that that's where I'm going with my life. No, no one's gonna call me a saint when I'm gone.
Yeah. No, yeah. It's just Yeah, we are complex beings, and
Yeah, yeah. And we're human. Gosh, we are not
yeah,
infallible.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I hope my children remember that I've apologized to them in the past for
Right.
for
Yeah,
things
yeah.
that I've, said that just were not kind.
Mhm.
And, so sometimes that happens where, you lash out, you say something stupid, and, you know, then you know that it was wrong, and
Mhm.
sometimes you don't
Mhm.
apologize right away. But to my children,
Yeah,
to anyone I've said anything horrible to and haven't apologized yet, I am
exactly
sorry.
right.
I mean, I am, because I don't want to, that's not the thing that I want people to remember me by,
Sure, sure. Yeah, I remember I had a roommate in college, and she later um, suffered from being an alcoholic and finally went into sort of rehab and had to do the 12-step thing. So I got a call from her out of the blue saying, Kathy, I'm so sorry, that I smoked in the room and that I did this or didn't do that. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? But, just that sort of process of digging up all the possible things, many of which have probably been forgotten or weren't that important, but it's a kind of cleansing, I guess. And so
Right, right.
interesting that,
Yeah, growing
yeah,
up Catholic, you'd go to confession for that kind of stuff, and you'd
right,
get
right.
you'd get cleansed.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes that is just a nice cleansing thing for the person. And sometimes for some people it's, okay, I took care of
Mm.
that. So
Hmm.
I can
Hmm.
do it
Right,
again.
right, right, right. That's not the way it's supposed to work. My understanding of that,
But
anyway.
yeah, yeah.
So
But
let me go back to my little thing that I printed out here.
yes.
Examples of kindness. In
Mhm.
case those of you listening and watching don't know what to do or how to be kind. Simple acts of kindness can include holding a door open, offering a helping hand, complimenting someone. By the way, I love your braid, or or simply being present and attentive to
Yeah.
others. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a writer, philosopher, novelist writer, Iris Murdoch. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but I didn't know much of anything about her. But like in the birthing house, I there was a point when I wanted to find something. I wanted to find a woman philosopher
Hmm.
uh, who seemed more sort of connected to down to earth kind of, and
Yeah.
and she talks about um, goodness and kindness and um, an image that I really liked called unselfing.
Hmm.
And it doesn't mean being selfless. It
Okay.
means taking yourself, your ego that you're seeing the world through, and sort of putting it aside. So she says through art and beauty is one way to do it. It sort of
Hmm.
takes you out of yourself and connecting with something that says things to you that
Like
but
trees,
also
like a tree.
yes, like
Yeah.
trees, for example. But also, she said it's a way of seeing other people as another center. That we unconscious. I mean, we are the center of our own worlds because
Yeah.
that's how it has to be. Um, and so we are sort of and we see through our own eyes and our own experience, but also it can isolate us if
Hmm.
we lose that awareness of the fact that I am a center of my world talking to you, and you are a center of your world talking to me. So you're not just an extension. You're not just there because I see you because you're my friend. You are a completely other being in the center of your world. And so that it sounds like a sort of simple, almost obvious thing, but it's actually fairly radical um, in the sense of just recognizing that. And I liked
Yeah.
the way you wrote about it.
Yes. And, ultimately we're all just children.
Yeah, I think that's quite true.
We're older,
For
we're
better
older
and for
children.
worse.
We're older children. Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember being at a teacher conference once and sitting at a table, and whoever was giving the presentation was telling us things that we already knew or had heard a
Right.
million
Yeah.
times, and we were feeling very patronized.
Yeah.
and we started passing notes and snickering, and teachers, professional teachers,
Yes, I know. I've seen
and
that.
yeah, and at one point it's like, oh my gosh, we are just like our students. We're
Yeah.
doing exactly what our students do, only
Yes.
we're older. So I don't know that we ever really grow up, but the idea of everyone being the center of their own universe, right? I mean, there are lots of other planets out there, um, all needing one another to stay in orbit and to stay
Yeah.
balanced, right?
Right, right.
And the idea of like taking these moments right now with you and seeing you and not worrying about what I'm cooking for dinner, but
Right, right.
having a conversation and
Yeah. Yeah.
the whole power of now thing.
Yeah.
I often
Yeah.
think about that.
Yeah. Yeah. We live in a world where that's makes it harder and harder to take a moment and focus on it. We're so used to multitasking and
Yes.
our phones dinging and um,
Hmm.
just the sort of notion of taking a moment and
Yeah,
an unscripted conversation is yeah, they're not that it's not that common, but it's nice.
it is nice. It is nice. And you had mentioned to me before when you asked if we were going to do this in person or on Zoom, and I said
Yeah.
Zoom, and you're like, well, we still need to get together, like in
Yeah.
person, face to face,
That would be
for a cup of
nice.
coffee or something, or
Yes.
a walk, which we do because
Yes.
that's different. Because then we can hug, and I think
Yes.
hugs are important
Hugs
too.
are important. Yeah.
I'm a hugger.
I am too. Yeah. I am
Oh,
too.
well, what else should we say about kindness other than, kill him with kindness? No,
Right.
but
You know,
sometimes you might want to.
there's I think it's Netflix program that we started watching that I didn't know what to expect, but we've really enjoy it. And it's called The Amazing Attorney Woo or something like that. It's a Korean um, series, and the woman who's an attorney is autistic.
Okay.
And so it's all about sort of how she deals with a world that she doesn't entirely understand, where people feel and see things differently than she does, and she's sort of learning. It's almost like going to a foreign land, and sort of learning how to manage the language and the interactions. But it's done incredibly with incredible depth and sensitivity. It's
All
not
right.
just sort of, and she grows, and so do the other characters around her. Um, and this one guy who is really sort of fascinated and drawn to her just as a person, in part because of her limitations, because that makes her more uh, sometimes more isolated and sometimes more open, but in a different way of seeing. And he falls in love with her and the challenges of that.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's just it has even the way it's filmed is sort of more artistic and slower in sort of focusing on her point of view. And yeah, it's hard to describe it, but
Right. No,
what I
I'm
thought
definitely
might
gonna
just
look
be
it
kind of
up. Yeah.
silly. It's actually
All
quite
right.
beautiful.
Oh, all right. That sounds
Yeah.
great.
Anyway, and
Well,
and sort of the
Kathy, yeah.
notion of us all being children in the
Yeah.
sense that we all have our sort of 2-year-old, I'm the center of the world and I want what I want. Um, now, if
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but also that sort of, marvel, open view of the world that everything is new and interesting. And so there's certain aspects of being childlike that I think we should hang on to.
Yay. Okay. Okay. And on that note, I think we'll end our little conversation on kindness, other than to let everybody know out there, don't be too hard on yourself if you find yourself
Yes,
that you are unkind at times, because, I'm pretty sure we're all human. Um,
yes.
and,
I,
we can learn from our mistakes and grow from them. And, I think just strive for one kind act each day, right? And,
yeah. Well, and I have a friend who says it's on her telephone recording and says, if she doesn't answer, she has a message and she says, and just remember, you're doing you're doing okay, and it's really hard being human.
Amen. It
So
is. It is. On
yeah,
that note, thank you, Kathy Taylor. I'll
yeah,
have links to your books down below. And
very much.
if listeners out there, if you have something you want to talk to me about, my new podcast name is Conversations with Laurel. Used to be Alligator Preserves. You can still see those episodes in the episode. I'll have the episodes that I interviewed you with, Kathy. And yeah, let me know. Let me know. Email me and we'll talk about something. And Kathy, it's May 2nd. Have a lovely rest of spring. We'll get together for coffee. And
Yes,
and you're beautiful. You're beautiful. And I love you.
so are you. And I love you too. And thank you for reaching out to me. Yeah.
You're welcome.
See you soon.
Take
Okay.
care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.